Hey there, welcome to the Bible in 5. This week you're going to be reading the book of Daniel, and so this video we're going to help you kind of explore the big picture themes of what's going on in this really cool book in the Old Testament. The book of Daniel, the setting of the story, you're given right in the first sentences of the book. This is in the time of the exile of the Israelites to Babylon. And so that was a key part of the story. The Israelites turned away from Yahweh. He allowed Babylon to come knocking at their door, essentially, and to take over Jerusalem. And they end up destroying it, destroying the temple. And they take captive thousands of Israelites and take them all the way to Babylon. And so the main character of the whole book is a guy named Daniel. And then in the first chapter is a bunch of Daniel's friends. And they're all Israelites who were taken captive and end up in Babylon. And so the main theme explored in these stories, the first half of the book is stories in chapters 1 through 6. It's stories about Daniel and his friends living in a foreign land, and not just a foreign land, living in a culture of people that are opposed to their way of life as followers of Yahweh. And so these stories are about how God's people remain faithful to Him, or at least can remain faithful, or should remain faithful, even when the culture around you is not just foreign, but opposed to what you believe, where people persecute you because of your beliefs and because of your lifestyle as followers of this God. And so the pattern of what happens in the stories is at each chapter, Daniel and his friends are forced to make a choice. Are they going to compromise their devotion to Yahweh, or are they going to remain faithful? And they remain faithful in story after story, and then they get persecuted in various ways. And time after time, God delivers Daniel and his friends from danger, from opposition, and so on. So the main theme here, the setting of the book, is God's people are in exile. These stories are an encouragement for them to remain faithful to God in the midst of exile. One of the key moments here in this first half of the book is in chapter 2. And the king of Babylon has a dream, and Daniel happens to be one of the advisors to the king and so on. And so Daniel comes to interpret the dream. It's a strange dream. The king has a dream about this big statue made up of all these different kinds of metal in the statue. And Daniel discerns that these are symbolic. And each of these metals represents a different kingdom. And he gets this idea from this dream that there's going to be a sequence of kingdom after kingdom after kingdom after kingdom. Not just Babylon. They're in exile to Babylon right now, but pretty soon they're going to be exiled under a different empire, Persia after that. And then after that will come Greece and then Rome. And he discerns that the exile is going to be a much longer reality than just 70 years, a generation or two in Babylon. And so what Daniel discerns here is that even though the world events seem out of control, even though exile has taken the whole storyline of Israel and the covenant off track, we're wondering, is God really in control? And what Daniel gets a glimpse of in this vision is that, yes, God is in control of the nations. His plan hasn't gone off the tracks. Therefore, God's people can be faithful to trust Him even when they're being persecuted. And that really is the transition to the next half of the book, chapters 7 through 12. And this is very different. There's no more stories here. Daniel starts having dreams and visions at night that wake him up and they bother him. Instead of being exalted at the end of every chapter, he ends up confused or scared or sick to his stomach at the end of all of his dreams and visions. And essentially, they all kind of play out the same pattern with different symbols and stories. They're symbolic dreams. And chapter 7 is kind of the key one. He has this dream of all these different symbolic animals. And each of the animals represents a kingdom, just like the metals of the statue, a sequence of kingdoms. And what Daniel gets by this sequence of symbolic animals is very similar. There's going to be a sequence of kingdoms that are opposed to God's people. But at the end of this sequence of kingdoms, God's going to bring the kingdom of God. He says God is going to sit at like a throne and judge all of the nations. And there's going to be this figure who comes to sit beside God when He judges all nations. And this figure is called the Son of Man. It's a very mysterious figure. And you get through the idea of all of these dreams then is just like chapter 2, God's people are in exile. And that may last a really long time. There's going to be lots of nations that oppose God and oppose God's people. But at the end of each of the visions, the wicked among the nations are brought to judgment, and God's people and God's deliverer, represented by the Son of Man, will be exalted, And so what you walk away here is just saying God's in control of the nations. Our responsibility is to be faithful to our God. And He's in control of world events, and He will send the deliverer. He will send the Son of Man to deliver His people at some point in the future. And our basic response to God is one of trust. So this book is meant to be an inspiration of hope and trust in God's promises to send the Messiah and the deliverer and to control world events, and my response is to be obedient and faithful. That's the basic message of the book. It obviously speaks a message relevant to all generations of God's people, and that's clearly why it's in the Scriptures. So there you go. That's the book of Daniel. It's very powerful. I hope that's helpful for you, and we'll see you next time.